This is a time and place for a city commission meeting here in South Dakota, November 14th, 2022. Roll call, please.
Smith.
Here.
Weinrich.
Here.
Bragg.
Here.
Robish.
Present.
Mayor Harrington.
Here. Join me in pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Agenda approval. Do we have any additions or deletions from our agenda tonight?
Move to approve as presented.
Okay. Commissioner Roberts moves to approve. Need a second on this item.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Smith. Roll call vote, please.
Smith.
Aye.
Weinrich.
Aye.
Bragg.
Aye.
Robish.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye. Public forum. Public comments may be sent during a live meeting broadcast on the city's YouTube channel. This link is listed on the city's website at www.huronsd.gov. Click on Government and then City Commission. In order to use the YouTube chat feature, please create an account with YouTube and Gmail or use your existing accounts. Please state your name and address for the record. Public forum is limited to a maximum of 3 minutes per person. Is there anybody in the council that has public forum tonight? Seeing none from the audience. Everybody's jumping up. Okay. Move on. Okay.
Consent.
Consent tonight. Matters appearing on the consent agenda are expected to be non-controversial and will be acted upon by the commission at one time without discussion unless a member of the commission requests an opportunity to address any given item. Items removed from the consent agenda will be discussed at the beginning of the formal items. 4.1, minutes of November 7th, 2022, City Commission meeting. 4.2, fuel quotes for city departments. 4.3, payment of the bills. Need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Bragg, motion to approve. Second, Commissioner Roberts. Roll call vote, please.
Smith.
Aye.
Weinrich.
Aye.
Bragg.
Aye.
Robish.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye. Okay, bid quotes. Who's doing this one?
Rob.
Rob is, Rob's here. Rob, you're gonna do 5.1 for us?
Well, I thought Dennis was, but
No, I can do it, Rob.
I'm just here to answer
Rob will
questions.
have them. Okay.
All right, assistant engineer.
All right.
Dennis, Bay, no fighting over this. Dennis, you do it this time. Rob, do it next time.
All right. Capital Assets Committee met the van Rob wanted with the shortage of vehicles and stuff. It was just not gonna happen. So we can find one, but it's 17 grand more than we had budgeted. Capital Assets Committee recommends approval to go ahead with purchase.
Need a motion to approve on this item?
Move to approve.
Move to approve, Commissioner Bragg. Need a second.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Smith. Any discussion on this item? Yes, Drew.
I just seen here that it says an additional 14,700. Is that correct versus the 17 you had said, Dennis?
Yep, that's what happens when I'm not prepared, sorry.
No, just correction.
Any other questions on this item? Roll call vote, please.
Smith.
Aye.
Weinrich.
Aye.
Bragg.
Aye.
Robish.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye. 5.2, Assistant Engineer Dennis Bennett will bring us up to date on 5.2.
Thank you. This is for the asphalt milling machine that was budgeted for 2023. We want to get it on order so we can hopefully have it so we can use it next summer. So we're just asking for permission to go to bid with this.
Okay. Need a motion to approve.
Move to approve 5.2.
Second.
Commissioner Roberts, or Commissioner Weinrich, move to approve. Second, Commissioner Roberts. Any discussion on this item?
Oh, question.
Yes,
Mayor.
Commissioner Smith.
So Dennis, just for clarification, this machine, we already have a machine like this?
We do, it's 10, 12 years old.
Okay, and that's gonna go out on surplus, or is it gonna be traded in?
Well, we're allowing a trade-in on this one, because I think chances are it's gonna be a sole source bid, because it's kind of a specialized piece of equipment. And they have offered us what we consider a reasonable trade. So that's how we're planning on going ahead with it.
And maybe just for my understanding, what does the machine do?
Before we do like water main replacement, we'll go in and mill the street up. So we're not tearing up asphalt, we got grindings we can take out. Just cleans up the job a little, and then Bob and the street department guys use it for street repair also. If we have a big patch that's broke up and crumbled, they'll grind it, and it makes it more like a gravel substance. So they can either use it for base, or they can dig it out easy and put in new asphalt, whatever they need.
Okay, so this machine just kind of cuts that top layer off and grinds it all up kind
It'll
of thing?
go up to 12 inches deep,
Okay.
so yeah, it can grind. The big machine they do on the streets, that before we mill, when we mill an overlay, this is just a smaller one of those.
I gotta see this thing.
That goes on front of the payloader, and
Field
it
trip
has a
this
separate motor and
Yeah.
everything up there. It's a specialized piece of equipment.
Put me on the list next spring.
To
I
drive.
gotta, I gotta see this thing.
summer.
I wanna see you with the hard hat up there driving.
We'll
And
do
it
your
does
street
have a-
first, we'll do your street first, how's that sound?
It does come with a remote, so the person out in front, on the ground, where they can see what's going on, they can control the depth and all that too, so.
Cool,
Hmm.
thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions on this item?
Real
Yes.
quick follow-ups. I mean, we also occasionally sell our millings when asphalt paving needs them, right? Is that?
With this, they're not clean enough or fine enough that asphalt paving would buy it, but we use it in alleys or wherever. The stuff we sold to asphalt paving was with the great big milling machine.
Okay.
It does a much finer job, much finer material with it.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this item? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Smith,
Aye.
Weinreich.
Aye.
Gregg,
Aye.
Robish. Mayor Harrington.
Aye. Moving on to petitions and communications, 6.1, Pauline, I believe you're gonna talk on that one.
Yeah, you can see in your packets, we have the renewals for the liquor and wine licenses. We recommend approval on all of them. There, you can see in the packet also, we have the fire chief and the building official have done their inspections. We have no deficiencies in any, nothing, we recommending to hold licenses, so we received no comments and asked for approval.
Need a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Commissioner Smith, motion to approve. Need a second on this item.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Bragg. Okay, any discussion on this item? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Smith,
Aye.
Weinreich,
Aye.
Gregg,
Aye.
Robish, Mayor Harrington.
Aye. Moving on to item 6.2. City Planner Barry Cranston's going to tell us what 60.2 is.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Okay, this is dating back to almost nearly 25 years now. This is a plat that has been, it's in the city's name, and we're submitting it to this body for jurisdictional approval of it. This cleans up a plat that had an error in it when Mr. Butch Spain and his wife purchased their land. As you can see, I'll give you an idea from the board up here. This, the large building here in the center of the screen is actually James Valley School. And so Mr. Spain's property is down 15th Street southeast, or northeast, excuse me, and across the river. And then his property is this large property right here, where the arrow, the hand is circling. So on the plat itself, we're asking this plat be approved, and what this does, this gives us a legal address for the properties in green. And then that would give us the legal address so that we can convey those two parcels. And then Mr. Spain has taken the plat of the pink triangle there to the county. And the county has approved that plat already. So what this does is this establishes the two or three legal addresses that we needed to properly exchange the properties, with the intent that this would then meet the goal back 25 years ago when the city sold him the lots, and unfortunately there was a mistake in the plat, and what Mr. Spain thought he was actually purchasing ended up being about 30 feet short of the water line. And that was the intent, is to sell him that property. So currently, he has up to about up to a line of about 30 feet short of the water line. And that remained in the city's name. And he found this out because in the top parcel in that what would be the northwest corner, that's a 2-acre plat, or 2-acre parcel that which got a variance to sell to his renters there. So they had to do some resurveying, and that's when they discovered this about 2 months ago probably, that there was an error in this original plat from 25 years ago. So with that, I entertain any questions. It's kind of a complicated ordeal, but I didn't entertain any questions. I'd like to put a motion on the floor to accept the plat.
Have a motion?
Move to approve 6.2.
Okay. Commissioner Weinrich moves to approve. Need a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Robish. Now, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it because it's kind of messed up.
So just some for clarification for the other
Yes.
guys who may not have seen this, but, so what actually needs to happen is the green part is technically city-owned currently, that Mr. Spain has been graciously taking care of for the last 25 years. And then what is in pink there in the triangle is actually Ravine Lake, and that is technically owned by Mr. Spain currently.
Right.
And so what he wants to do is pretty much swap. We would take the triangle part in the middle there, and then the other two would be assessed on his property.
Yeah, they would be exchanged. That would be the plan. Before we can do that, we have to schedule a hearing and, have notice the public of this exchange. But yes, that is the tentative plan.
So Barry, I understand why the pink is agricultural, so that piece, and then I understand that the green is by the parcel that will be residential, sold out.
But
Why
it
is
is all zoned ag, by the way.
Okay, it is, so
Yeah.
that's what I was wondering, so that part on the south, bottom of the drawing, why, I guess, what is the reasoning? I understand the part on the top being next to the homestead, but what is the difference between the two parcels, the two south ones?
It was simply a mistake in the plat. There was a discrepancy between the original sale agreement and the original deed. And that the deed was based on the plat, and so there was a discrepancy that came out of that.
But so, like, moving forward, why would not everything to the south all be handled the same way? I mean, I'm not trying to say there's anything wrong with this. I think
Right.
it seems like you guys have worked through it fine. I'm just trying to understand, for my sake, why part of the land we would have ownership, or he would have ownership, and part would go back.
Right, when the original sales agreement was developed, it used some very vague language about the average water line and some of those kinds of things. And so what it did is And some of this dates back to, clear back to 1936, from before the WPA dam was installed. And we traced it back to a plat out of Pierce Harris's office. But, so, let me get on this side. So this green parcel in particular, this is Mr. Spain's house, right here. It's all zoned ag, and this is Mr. Spain's house, and so he thought he was getting all the way down to the river line. Well, because of this mistake in Mr. Hodgins' plat, he's about 30 feet short of where the water line is, even though he's been taking care of it for all these years, with the understanding he thought that was his. So what this does, this plat creates the legal address that can be conveyed then for these two lots in green. And this, by the way, this parcel that's in part right-of-way, that's a statutory requirement for a county plat up there. So that, he's not really getting control of the right-of-way necessarily, just for the purposes of clarification. And then what he intends to do is then, he has platted this off and the county has approved the pink plat, the triangle here, with the intent that after we advertise for the public hearing, we hold the hearing at this body, and then we could then, upon approval, exchange properties.
And so then, let's say you've got two homesteads, so let's say somewhere down the road, lakefront property, somebody wanted to put another house in that area that's pink, what would have to happen?
This area is underwater.
Well, no, I'm saying, but I guess I'm just trying to understand, so like the waterfront on that property is fine though?
Yes, right there, it followed the line, but it did not here. So what happened was, he ended up owning the property that was underwater. And he thought that it followed the same line, but it did not.
Sure. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that
Right.
we weren't gonna be set up where
No,
we're
and
doing
then-
something now that we'd have to fix again.
No,
later.
that's why we're trying to resolve this
Yeah.
now. So because he did get a variance, normally they need to be lots of greater than 5 acres. He did get a variance to convey this to his renters, which is only 2 acres, a little over 2 acres. And that would he would then retain all of these, and that would give him more than 5 acres. But if he were to try and convey something out of this parcel, he would be below that, and that would require a variance from the county again.
Okay. Thank you.
Clear as mud.
Any other questions for Barry up there, anyone?
Just,
Go ahead, Mr. Swing.
so with the redesignation of the green lines, does that western boundary, does that actually go into the lake?
It goes right up to the river line. Yes, it does.
What level line? The high water mark or what?
No, this would take it right to this would take it right down to the bottom of the river water line.
Okay,
So they wouldn't have that problem again.
yeah. That's kind of where I was going with it is,
Yeah, and Randy surveyed it that way on purpose so that it would go into the water.
yeah. Okay, thanks.
I should say Randy Holscheid from Pierce Harris for the record.
Yep. Any other questions on this item? See none?
Just for
Yes.
clarification, you are merely approving the plat at this point. This is not the public hearing stage of this transaction.
Good point, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
That's fine. I just was gonna ask Mr. Spain if he's got any insight to that, or that's up to you, I guess, if you allow him to.
If he wants to,
Yeah?
I guess I would ask him.
I do have a comment. in regards to the cost of the plat. It cost more money this time because of the 3 plats we had to do. I was thinking we needed 1 plat because I thought I owned more of the property. I come to find out the city still owned part of it, so we had to have a plat for the city. I had to have another plat for me for the triangle part, and then the final plat had to be drawn up. So I was hoping that the city could take some responsibility in some of the cost of this. It was a $3,800 bill total. So I don't know if this is the right place to ask for that or not, I don't know. So if the city could see that they had some responsibility in it as well. I'm not trying to get out to pay the bill, I will pay the bill, the city will help, but I think that the city did have some responsibility back then in the mistake that was made. Okay?
Was the city engineer that did it, or was it a private engineer?
It was the city engineer that was involved at the time.
Yeah, but the plats were drawn by Hodgins
Right.
Engineering.
Right,
Oh, okay, that's the point.
Yeah.
yeah.
So they made the mistake. Hodgson made the mistake.
Yeah, but the city engineer at the time approved it. This body approved it. I mean, maybe not you guys personally, of the sale of the property to me, and it wasn't the total land that I sold it to.
Right.
Oh, right, yes,
So I'm just trying to, how long have you owned the property?
20 years.
Okay, so going back 20 years, when you acquired the property, this plat was performed. Am I on the right page
Yes,
there?
yes,
yes.
Based on the legal description of the transaction, it was platted and surveyed according to that. So the original description of the land on the deed was wrong.
That came from this plat,
Okay,
from Hodgins plat.
okay. That's what I need to clarify in my mind.
As far as we can tell, that's what happened.
Any other questions for Mr. Spain?
And the city owned it at that time.
Correct. Correct.
All right. We good to go on with our vote?
How do we want to handle this request?
I was gonna say, that,
I think that we'll get that down the road. We've got a few more steps we gotta go through.
Think
Am I
let's
right,
address
Greg?
that today.
Yeah, I mean, because you've still got to go through a public hearing process. And you've still got to approve the actual exchange beyond that, correct, Tucker?
Correct.
And so you could at that time, you can take time to think about if you're going to consider his request for approval, you could use the next 2 weeks, because what will happen is next week it will be on the agenda to set the public hearing date. So then it goes to set the public hearing date, and it would be 2 Mondays after that. So it would be whatever date that becomes, the 5th of December, 9th of December, whatever that is. And then at that time, you could consider that as a separate motion and transaction.
Plus we have an appraisal, independent
Yeah,
appraisal.
and that'll be on next week's agenda. I've already talked to three landowners for an appraisal committee. So that would be on to approve next week as well, as part of that, to appoint the 3 to an appraisal committee.
So we got some hoops to jump through.
Yeah,
So,
so you could table that part of the discussion until such time as you get down the road
yeah.
3 weeks.
and I guess I would have one more question for him then, if that's the case. If that's fine, to wait another 2 to 3 weeks for that answer.
Sure, I'm not looking for to pay the whole thing, I've already paid some of the bill already, and Randy's okay with that.
So the process, to put it kind of clear in my mind, we're approving or disapproving, as it may be, If this were a separate transaction, it'd be like somebody coming in and saying, hey, I wanna buy these pieces, and as part of that, I need to replat it. And what we're approving is the
Just the
replat prior to
replat
the
of-
purchase
yeah.
and the exchange of the properties.
Right, because this establishes the two parcels in the green
Right.
that allows
So
us,
the motion of the transfer of property is, or the,
that's down
that's,
the road.
that's what you're saying is going to,
That will be down the road.
after the
This
hearing.
is joint jurisdictional, right? So the county has got to look at all this.
Yeah, and the county so far has approved this, and
He just didn't have as much oceanfront property as he thought he had.
yeah, that's,
There you go.
Yeah, it's got more.
And yeah, in terms of the other request, I mean, I think we've got time, to the mayor's point, to figure it out, but I think we should, I'd be interested to know historically, when a private body presents something and then we approve it, is this body or the city as an entity expected to verify everything that's presented to us by a body? And then I think that's one general question. I think in this particular one, there's also the question that if we were a party to the sale, we maybe even have a little bit more, if we were the seller, this is maybe different than other transactions where we were merely the body from which everything passed through.
oversight.
If we were one party to the sale, that might make this deal different, but that would be stuff we would be able to look into historical.
So specifically, what are we voting on tonight?
So tonight, you're voting on whether or not to approve this plat. And when I say this plat, it's the plat that's in your packet that establishes the legal description for Spain Outlot 3, which is the lower green outlot, and Spain Outlot 4, which is the upper parcel.
Okay. Okay, does everybody understand what we're voting on tonight? Okay, I entertain a roll call vote, please.
Grant.
Aye.
Weinreich.
Aye.
Bragg.
Aye.
Robish.
Aye.
Mary Harrington.
Aye. Okay, passed.
More to come, Butch.
Now we're moving on to ordinances and resolutions, 7.1. Gary, it looks like you got three of them.
Well, you gotta do 6.3 on the opioid.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Opioids.
That's Pauline.
Yes. I have been, excuse me, thank you. I have been visiting with the state of South Dakota Department of Health on the opioid settlement agreement. Right now, we don't know the amount of money that's available, but there's a possibility of receiving money over the next 18 years. We currently don't have any programs, so we can do a share. I did ask some questions because a lot of the things that the money could be used on, we do not do. So I asked, can we use them for like the drug dog or the user or salaries? We cannot. Can we use them on DARE? Yes. And then we can do collaborations with other governments. So I know the county has, excuse me, some programs. So with that, between the mayor and I visiting with the Department of Health, we decided we would ask that we sign up for this money. And as the money comes in, we'll come to you guys to figure out what to use it for. So authorize the mayor to sign and then to approve the memorandum of agreement with the Department of Health, please.
Your motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Okay, Commissioner Smith, Mr. Troop, second.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Bragg. Any questions on this item?
I have a
Yes.
question, Mayor.
Commissioner
Um,
Smith?
Is substance abuse rehabilitation, would that be part of it? Use of funds?
Like working with community counseling?
Correct,
Yes,
yes.
yes. Giving it to them to use for programs, yes, absolutely. It's just, yeah, finding those collaborations.
Do you have an idea of how much this is?
We have no idea.
Could be $100 for the next 18
It could be
years.
100, 4,500, we have no idea. I asked the question twice.
Can I ask when this came up? Is this the first time it's come up for us? How do you know?
Within the last couple months. Yep.
Is it new from the state?
Yes, it's a settlement nationwide that the state's gonna receive money.
It's a portion.
So we're portion, I suppose the state's a portion. And in the back of this, you can see kind of the percentages, but it doesn't say how much money. So you don't know that percentage of what goes by county.
Did they,
And each county in the cities in the counties are allotted.
was there any discussion on where this came from? What brought
It's
this
a
on?
national opioid study lawsuit,
Yeah,
Pharmaceutical company.
pharmaceutical company, yeah,
So every state gets this.
yeah.
yeah.
So that
It's
they,
like when they did the
tobacco one.
tobacco use one with the cigarette companies.
Okay. That's what I was wondering, who initiated this and why?
Yeah, it wasn't a state, it was a national lawsuit.
Some very rich lawyers right now.
Well, I have my
So-
own ideas where it came from, but I can't. I can only speculate.
You know, like, yeah, it, you know, it's in the packet and it doesn't say the.
Okay, we're going to do a roll call vote, please.
Smith,
Aye.
Weinrice,
Aye.
Bragg,
Aye.
Robish,
I,
Mayor Harrington.
Aye. Now we can move on to 7.1. And that's ordinance and resolutions, and that's Mary Cranston, the city planner, is going to have about 3 of them to work on tonight, so.
Yep,
You're
I
up.
told you I slowed up them today. This is the first reading of ordinance number 2242-23-408, rezoning Lot 7 of Robin Creek Industrial Park from I-1 Limited Industrial District to R4 Multiple Family Residential District, and set a public hearing and second reading for November 28th. Greater Huron Development has approached they have submitted the proposal to, and the proposal has been accepted by HME Management Company to construct a assisted living facility in what is now known as Lot 7 of the Broaden Creek Business Park. On the board, you'll note the faint orange outline there. This is proposed to be a 60-unit assisted living facility. There will be 20 essentially senior apartments, 20 assisted living apartments for transitional care, and then 20 memory units. So this does include a memory care unit. The total cost is estimated to be preliminarily approximately over $20 million for the facility. So the Greater Huron, as the applicant, is proposing to rezone the facility to R4, which allows for a conditional use permit to be granted for multifamily residential use. And the conditional use does allow for assisted living and nursing home care. So the Planning Commission heard this the other night. They did recommend approval unanimously, although we did have some anxious neighbors that they're just concerned about what the future may hold, you know, staffing and costs and things, and, you know, they're not against the project necessarily, but they're just anxious because they live out there and they want to know that they got some assurances that everything is being looked at as a part of our building permit process and plan review process, and before everything is just granted carte blanche. So, as I said, the Planning Commission did look at that, and while they couldn't really grant any assurances for, you know, if the facility were to be built and it went under, can you give us any kind of assurance it won't be sold to, for example, out-of-state owners or something like that? Well, obviously, no one can do that, but, you know, then we did, the planning commission did sympathize and empathize with their, with, you know, their concerns and so, but they did go ahead and approve it, recommend approval to the city commission for a rezone.
You have a motion to approve?
Move to approve 7.1.
Commissioner Weimer's motion to approve, need a second on this item.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Smith. Any questions on this item?
I have one question, Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Rover.
Thank you. Mr. Cranston, can you
Yep.
tell me on the east yellow line there, from
Mhm.
the east yellow line to the waterway, how much is left there? Do you know about?
There's approximately 3 acres there, 2 to 3 acres.
Obviously.
Originally, that was platted as a 5-acre lot, and then Dakota Provisions initially purchased was called the east half.
So they own on the east.
They own the
west
east side of the waterway there, and that drainage way has been, that's a easement in perpetuity. If you'll remember way back when we installed the park at Greater Huron, we did a drainage easement there with the Economic Development Administration, the federal agency, to ensure that that drainage way would always remain in place and open, just to ensure that anything north of there would have drainage.
So then does Dakota Provision still own that on the west side of the waterway?
On the north side of the road, they do.
No, I mean just on the west.
Oh, on the west half, I believe Greater Huron and
Greater Huron.
PHDC.
Yeah, to my knowledge.
But it's not, I mean, you say 2 to 3 acres, it's considerably longer than wider.
Right,
I'm just wondering.
correct.
And the property line kind of goes right under that waterway, so there's a
Right.
good portion of that land that's not buildable.
Right.
That's my outlook down the road. What
Right.
can you put in there to where we don't come back in 25 years from now, replat that to this? Why don't we just put it all from the waterway to the, you know what I'm saying? You couldn't put a house in between there.
Yes, you could. Yes, you could.
Isn't that
There's enough land, you could put a residence in there, but you couldn't put a large, multi-unit,
No.
apartment complex or something
Yeah,
like
and
that.
that's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah, right.
And putting a road in plus houses would be tight on some
Yeah.
of those lots.
On-
And that's
Yes.
because you don't have access from the south, so.
Right.
Right.
Anyway, just a thought
Mhm.
down
Yeah.
the road.
It's probably for the foreseeable future, that probably would just sit,
Unbuildable.
just be green space.
Which wouldn't hurt, and I believe as part of the project, they're talking about adding a tree line on the east property line of lot 7. Just to give it some aesthetics.
Yeah,
Because to the rear, to the southeast of that facility, the facility would face to the northwest. So to that southeast corner, there'll be like a public walkway and kind of a courtyard. Right, yeah. Oh, that's right, that is in the packet, isn't it?
I
So-
get that, I was just looking down the road, we did a sliver up there by the Broadman Creek Golf Course,
Right,
just because we were still owners of that, and it was like nothing, and nobody
Mhm.
took care of it. Nobody took care of it.
right. So, but that is the proposal anyway, that they're,
Yeah, it's a great proposal, I'm all for that, sure all for
No, it's a valid point, Mark, and I think that the HME group was, I mean, that comment was brought up, but they were pretty particular in the size of the parcel that they were interested in.
that, that's fine.
Okay,
No problem.
all right. We're in the process of voting on, roll call vote on first reading of ordinance number 2242-23-408, rezoning Lot 7 of Broadland Creek Industrial Park.
Smith,
Aye.
Weinreich,
Aye.
Gregg,
Aye.
Robish,
I,
Mayor Harrington.
Aye. Okay, 7.1 passed. Now we're going to go to 7.2. Barry Cranston, once again.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is the first reading of ordinance number 2244-23-410. Zoning administration, pardon me,
Yeah.
I'm on the wrong one.
Yeah, go 7.2.
Yeah. This is the first reading of ordinance number 2243-23-409, rezoning Lot 8 of Broadland Creek Industrial Park from I-1 Limited Industrial District to R3, 1-family, 2-family, and townhouse residential district, and to set a public hearing and a second reading for November 28th. This is the rezone request, again by Greater Huron Development, for the east side of the road, directly, or to the west side of the road, directly to the west of the parcel we were just in question. As you can see on the aerial map on the board, that would be this section of just north of Dakota Central USPS Processing Center. So it's this area right here, with the thought in mind that they would create a cul-de-sac that would look something similar to what this shows. There are, I believe, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 lots. 13 lots there. And this is a preliminary drawing of how it would lay out. The R3 district is the same zoning district as what is north on Broadland Creek, in the Broadland Creek Housing Development District up there. The Planning Commission heard this and again unanimously approved it and recommended approval by this body. Again, there were some residents up there that live on the north side of this development that felt strongly that the Economic Development Corporation should install covenants similar to what is up there in that R3 district. Mr. Hayter, Ted Hayter, was there on behalf of Greater Huron Development and said he had no objection to that, and so he was going to look into what it would take to do that. And so the Planning Commission actually approved that, and I don't believe that let's get the minutes out quick here. I don't believe that,
Recommendation of restricted covenants.
yeah, okay, they did approve it with the recommendation that the covenants are included for the neighborhood. Yeah. With the exception of the golf course side covenants, there were some covenants up there that were a little different than what they would normally sign on the south side of the road there.
What kind of covenants are we talking about?
Oh, it's things like, any accessory buildings would be made to look similar in style and color to the existing houses. Main level of 1,500 square feet,
Garage must be attached.
garage must be attached, similar to that. Nothing very onerous by any means.
which again, we have nothing to do with.
Right, and for the record, we do not enforce private sector covenants. So that would be up to the neighborhood. If somebody has, issues up there, then they would have to confront them through the legal process. So, again, the planning commission recommended approval of the rezone.
I have a question for,
Do we have a
We
motion
don't
to
have a
approve?
motion yet.
Need a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Commissioner Smith, motion to approve. Need a second on that motion.
second.
Second, Commissioner Roberts. Now we can answer your question.
Sure. Thank you. Do we have is there a specific contractor on this, or
There is not yet. In both cases, these are preliminary numbers. One of the things that is being proposed is that a TIF district be approved for both sides of the road for parcels number 7 and parcel number 8. Obviously, parcel number 8 here would obviously have to be replatted to allow for the new lots and things. But should they do that as part of the tax increment district financing, then those are professional fees that could be included.
but then we would be responsible for the infrastructure, the streets?
No,
No?
but that could be privately funded.
That's what
Yeah, we would.
Yeah, in this particular case, what they are proposing to us is that it would be privately funded. So just because it would be tax increment district financing, that's very preliminary. And so we have not had any discussions other than Pauline and I have met and Dennis and, you know, some of us are kind of privy to the plans. We've met and had some very preliminary discussions with the finance people there. But that was really it. So we have a long ways to go before that's
Yeah.
ever approved.
Any other questions on this item?
Mayor, before you vote, if I may re-clarify my motion, and that would be to include the recommendation of the restrictive covenants portion that are included in, to be the same as the Broadland Creek excluding the golf course related items. I'd like to clarify that as part of my motion.
Okay, very good, very good. Anything else? Okay. This is going to be, we'll have a vote on the first reading of ordinance number 2243-23409. Roll call vote, please.
Smith.
Aye.
Weinreich.
Aye.
Gregg.
Aye.
Robic.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye. 7.2, first ordinance reads has passed, okay? Very moving on to 7.3.
Okay, hopefully this is the last one here.
That's the last one on my list.
This is the first reading of ordinance number 2244-23-410, zoning administration and enforcement, type 2 moderate effect home occupation, and set a public hearing and second reading for November 28th. This ordinance came about, we've been approached now on a couple of occasions for people wanting to become similar businesses to drop shipment businesses where they're like Amazon affiliates. And so these areas in the residential areas are starting to receive anywhere from 20 to 50 boxes a day from large trucks, and they're dropping them off, and then it's their job to go out and deliver them in the community, similar to essentially a private UPS company or something like that. And so what this is doing is this is causing some traffic concerns in the neighborhoods. We now have, as I understand it, three different, one is in a commercial zone, so that's not quite the same concern, but the other two are in residential areas where they're delivering packages to the garage in the alley. And then that business is then able to then go out and deliver all the packages, and sometimes that's, like I said, 20 to 40 or 50 packages a day. Well, if we're going to see large truck traffic go down these alleys and start beating up these alleys for, 250 days a year, that may cause some maintenance concerns. And so what we did is we created a category for that in the home occupation, so that, and it does say in there that the owners could be subject to repair costs for these alleys if we start having large truck traffic on a daily basis starting to wreck our alleys behind their residences.
So would that be enforceable?
I believe so. I mean, those are the costs that are being created as a result of direct, truck traffic through, because you still have ordinances on the books that talk about where large trucking can be in town, so.
Mayor, if I can ask.
Yes.
Because how could we say that it was that truck that caused that damage? How do we know it wasn't the old next door that caused that damage to that alley? And then another point to that is just speaking, is like the alley behind Subway. So you're saying Subway should be responsible to maintain that since they have those large trucks coming in and out of there?
Well, Subway got a variance to go through their process, okay? So yes, there was an oversight event there, or a process for them to go through. So they did have to make some concessions and allow for some of those things to happen. So this would give us at least some oversight and control over a home occupation that could potentially affect the quiet and the viability of a neighborhood.
Well, that's more of it than damage to the alleys.
Well, but
Garbage
it's
trucks
in
are-
both, it's included, that language is included in there. Now, if you wanted to prove it, obviously, without by striking that language,
No, I'm with you on this, Barry, to keep, I'm with you on that part of it, but our
Mhm.
garbage trucks are half the size of those trucks and they're heavier,
Mhm.
as heavy, so we're doing as much damage. What I'm concerned about is if you don't have an experienced truck driver, there's gonna be damage to poles, to
Mhm.
wires, to bushes, to trees, to fences. And then who's gonna be responsible? I know they're gonna be
Mhm.
responsible, but then it's gonna be a fight with the city, the landowner, and some truck driver that's in Florida tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so I'm with you on trying to keep things. And I don't wanna be the sheriff on, you can't do this for your neighbor, and you can't, and I get that.
But we essentially are the sheriff
Yes,
today
yes.
for
I
those
get that.
home occ twos and
Right.
in particular, the home occupation threes, where they have to come in front of this body and validate their project, so to speak.
With the size of that, some of those, that equipment that's bringing those boxes, because there's more and more of that, I don't like it going down the alleys, I don't like them on the streets, I really don't like them in the alleys. But anyway,
But this gives us a way to at least regulate them, because right now we have two that popped up that we know of that there was no regulation for.
But I think for me personally, I maybe had a different viewpoint on this until looking through at the other things that are already included in the ordinance. I mean, blade sharpening, barber shop, portrait studio, counseling, we're already monitoring those things. It's not like we have people coming before us every day asking if they can cut hair. We just have the oversight if it becomes a problem. And so, to me, at first I thought, well, maybe this is a little bit, maybe we are trying to overreach and police too much, but understanding what we've already got, if you look at it from that standpoint, it just gives us that opportunity. If something arises, we have a mechanism.
And this gives us the ability to, if we do receive complaints, now we have the ability to require them to come with us with a plan to this body and say, okay, we're going to have to resolve this, and we anticipate doing it this way.
Do they not have to have a home occupation yet for this? Because it's.
No, they never did before. That,
But will-
this drop shipment thing
They
is,
will now.
they will now.
That's a good thing.
Because you're seeing more and more of this happen where Amazon and the big boxes are farming this delivery process out more and more. And so they'll deliver it to a certain point. The one in the 5th Street Mall, or 15th Street Mall down there, they come through the alley and they deliver up to 200 packages a day. But that's in a commercial zone. So this is a little less than that, and so we didn't want to see, we didn't want to completely overreach and make it a home occupation 3 where they had to go through the hearing examiner process and then in front of this board. But we still had some control on it, and then if it did get away from us, then we could convert it to a 3 and make them come in front of the board.
Mayor, I'd move to approve ordinance 2244-23-4.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Bragg to approve. We have a second.
Second.
And a second, Commissioner Robish. Any more discussion on this item?
I have some, Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Smith.
So, maybe walk me through this a little bit more, so I understand the process. So, if this passes, and somebody in my backyard wants to do this, would it be my backyard or across the street or wherever the case
Right.
might be, they would apply for a home occupation permit type 1, which would graduate this to a type 2.
Then, under this, it would be, if they were doing a drop shipment center, it would immediately go to a type 2 consideration.
Okay, and that is subject to approval by the staff?
Either Chris or I have to sign off on it, as either the planning and zoning director or the building official.
Okay, and assuming that gets approved, it's a done deal.
Unless we receive complaints
After the fact.
after the fact that they are, and then we can require them to come in front of this body.
My concern on that is because of the, the damage is one thing to the alleys or whatever the case might be. My concern is the surrounding neighborhood has no input on that before the issue or the conditional use permit is issued. The surrounding community is going to be affected by this because of increased heavy traffic. And when I say heavy, it's heavy equipment traffic, trucks.
It would be large panic trucks is typically what, like mail trucks.
It's not a vehicle just pulling up and throwing a
No.
box out and away they go. And then it has to be redistributed. So if somebody is making several trips out of that facility and then having the storage, secured storage to hold that. And no offense to our city staff, but I think that's a level that should come to a public hearing.
The type 2 home occupation permits are typically considered to be a medium impact on a given neighborhood, where they would have limited impact on traffic coming and going. In this particular case, there was basically 1 truck per day, and then it would be up to the homeowners that could come and go as they needed to. So it really is more, we didn't feel it was going to create a storefront business, which is typically more of a type 3, where it would have to come in front of this body, where they would have customers coming and going all day long. But this did, it did create at least a minimal impact on the neighborhood, where there was at least one truck, and then the owners of the residents would be coming and going. So we felt like it didn't quite reach the threshold of what you were talking about as a type 3, where it would have to have a hearing examiner hearing and then be approved by this body. We didn't feel it quite met that threshold, but we definitely did need to have a review, and there did need to be some control, so that if the staff felt that it was getting out of hand, then we could require them to come back. Whereas a home occupation 1 permit is just minor.
Right.
Isn't it type two?
The problem with that scenario though, Barry, if given this example, your minimum is 20 units a day. And so that gets approved. And then all of a sudden it ramps up to 30 units a day on average, or 40.
Could, potentially, and then.
Where is the line? And then now you're coming back to the commission level of saying, hey, we've gotten a lot of complaints on this, I think we need to retract that. And then you're doing it after the fact. It's kind of like,
That's true, but
You're trying to-
we can't plan for everything, and so that's why we felt it did create some impact, and so we were concerned about that, and that's why we went to the 3, because not everything is going to create, a state of emergency or something where where we have 50 complaints a day about it, but there may be some complaints.
I just,
So that's why we selected the second level, the medium level.
yeah, and I respect that, Barry.
Yeah,
I'm just,
that's
I'm saying it, I think it should be a 3.
a 3.
Because after the fact, when the neighbors all of a sudden start seeing 20 to possibly 200 trucks going through the alley a day,
Well, he won't see 2 packages.
or packages,
Yeah,
okay, so it's
sure.
1 to 20 trucks
Sure.
going through their alley every day.
Well, and then, obviously, 200 packages, it could be letter sized, but, or it could be,
And I want to argue how
Yeah.
big, how many packages
Right,
are going to be on
and
it.
so-
My point is, if there's 5 trucks a day going through their alley or down their street
Mhm.
every day, I think we're going to create turmoil with the neighborhood after the fact. The neighbors are gonna say, well, the city approved this and we didn't have any say in it? And here we approve variances on whether to put a steel roof on a house? I mean, where's the balance in that?
I just didn't think it rose quite to the threshold, but that was just that was our opinion in the office as staff, and so if you gentlemen feel like as commissioners you want to raise it to a type 3, I have no qualms with that. It just changes the process a little bit.
And I guess that is my position on it, at least to start it out, as things go along, maybe it's, I'd rather be more restrictive up front and ease back than try to reverse the engine on the thing afterwards.
Yeah, that's fine. I wouldn't argue the point, I'm just saying, we just didn't feel like it met the necessary threshold to come before this body and take up your time to do
Is it
that.
type 2, I don't know, if for your type 2, does the neighborhood get a?
I believe Julie notifies them that there will be a home occupation. I think she sends a letter and just to notify them.
Because even if there's only 1 truck a day,
Right.
and there's 100 packages, there could be 10 to 15 vehicles to come to get those, or.
No, they don't,
They're
they're delivered out.
I get that,
Yeah.
but they could be going out several times.
Sure, sure.
Most
I
of
think it's
these, most of
become a
these folks,
home.
yeah, most of these folks are doing it in
They're
their
working
personal
from home,
vehicles.
Yeah.
their business is
So,
what it
yeah,
is.
so there are multiple trips, because obviously.
There's gonna be multiple trips,
Sure.
because when you take this
I
big
wouldn't-
truck,
I wouldn't
brings
argue
it
the
in,
point,
and
yeah.
the little
Wouldn't
car
argue
to
the
take
point.
it out.
But then to Drew's point earlier, I mean, at that point, that's driving your personal vehicle into your own garage. It's a little bit hard to say how many times is too many times to drive your own vehicle into your garage. And I, you know, Brian, I understand your point, and maybe, you know, maybe to keep it at a 2 and not elevate it to a 3, instead of having the limit be 20 to 200 packages, if we said 20 to 200 packages or no more than 5 trucks per week or something like that, you know, if we, just because I understand what you're saying, you know, the minimum sounds fine, but if they blow it up and we've got somebody using this like a warehouse where there's big trucks in their garage all day, that would be a problem. But, you know, I think the vast majority of those are probably gonna be less than 5 trucks per week, and then the rest of the traffic is gonna be them in their minivan going and making trips, and it probably, the reality of the way most people are actually gonna use it is not gonna need to be a 3, but I understand your point. I'd wanna have some protection so somebody doesn't abuse that. But, you know, is there another limitation we could put on this that you would be comfortable keeping it at a 2? You know, just because I think it would be nice if the staff would just take care of this, and then, like you said, so the city approved it, but if that, in your example, you know, the neighbors say, hey, the city approved this, and it's in my backyard, well, yes, we approved it conditionally with the understanding that if you have an issue with it as a neighbor, it does come back before this
And it
body.
does come back in front of the body.
You know, so it's not as if once we approve them for 20 packages and they start going crazy, and a neighbor says, wait, this is terrible, we still have, it's not like we just have to say, hey, our hands are tied.
That's
We
correct.
already approved them, they can do whatever they want. We'd still have the ability, if somebody was causing a traffic issue or a neighborhood issue, at that time, we could take it up. I mean, I tend to support Barry on this position here of, let's set it up for what most of the time is gonna happen. Let them handle it normally with the understanding that if somebody gets out of control, we still have that mechanism to go back and address it, rather than set it up where we make everybody do the larger process up front, even if they were only gonna be, you know, 10, 20 packages. Because I respect your point. I think I want to protect the neighbors as best we can, but approving this as a 2 doesn't mean that we're giving carte blanche to just let somebody come in and overrun the neighborhood.
There's a reason residential neighborhoods are residential neighborhoods. Not distribution centers.
Right, but and looking at 2, I mean, that's why we've got blade sharpening and portrait studio, and, I mean, that's kind of what this is already, is saying there's a reason why residential, if you want to run a portrait studio in your house, there's a mechanism with which we have to get approval. Same thing, if somebody that
But
is.
those types of businesses are much less impactful on the residential neighborhood than having truck traffic rolling through there.
We weren't aware of this until tonight, you know, this has been going on, and people have been doing this for how long? You know,
From what I understand,
And
these
what,
2 have
one
been
complaint?
operating for, we've not heard one complaint.
so how did this get brought up if nobody? has
Because we
complained?
had a lady that called and she wanted to do this, and I said, well, currently, I'd have to tell you that we would require you to get a home occupation permit, and we declared it a 2, because we felt like it was an impact to the neighborhood. However, there was nothing in our ordinance that specifically identified this type of business. But the intent of the ordinance, it does read in the intent of the ordinance that should a business want to be operating within a residential neighborhood, that this would allow us to issue that type of a permit. But so it was kind of a nebulous thing, and the staff made a kind of a judgment call that in order to operate, they would need to do that.
So Commissioner Smith, you know, would there be, like you're saying, if we put some sort of limitation where
No.
the number of trucks, there's nothing, anybody using their garage for this type of thing should be a 3.
Because it's very hard to regulate it. I mean, if they come in and say, yeah, it's gonna be 5 packages a day, it's be a truck every other day, fine, go. But then it turns out to be 50 packages a day and 5 trucks after the fact. How are you going to control that, or how are you going to monitor that and respond to verification of what you permitted?
So, and I respect your point, so I think we're having a good conversation, but how, in that instance, how would a 2 or a 3 be any different? Because in both cases, they have to come before somebody and say, this is a proposed number of packages. At some point, if they're over that proposed number of packages, it becomes an issue that we say, hey, you're doing too much. So whether they tell Barry and his staff that we're doing 50 a day, and they say okay, or they tell us that they're doing 50 a day, and we say okay. After the fact, it doesn't matter, once they're approved, really, what this changes is just who can approve it. Because if they're not following those guidelines, then there needs to be a complaint, and we need to follow up and bring them back in line, whether they are approved by Barry and his team. So I guess I would say, I understand what you're saying, and that's why I'm trying to work around this. I don't know with what you're saying that it accomplishes your end goal any differently. It's basically just, either way, somebody's gotta sign off and approve on these businesses. As a 2, these guys can do it without bringing it to us. As a 3, we do it. But to your point that, what if somebody says it's 20, that's fine, good. It doesn't matter whether they tell Barry that or they tell us that. After the fact, if they're abusing that and going beyond it, the mechanism is the same, whether it's a 2 or 3. Would that be a fair statement?
That's the first.
So that's my point. I get what you're trying to do. I'm just not sure that what you're proposing makes a difference in the end goal you're trying to get to.
Who's going to enforce how many packages are delivered every week each day?
We can't.
Can't unless there's a
Complaints from neighbors in either 2 or 3, that's the only way we can handle it, is somebody says, I'm sick and tired of all these trucks in my backyard, they're making noise and tearing up the alley.
That's
Either
true.
way, we
That's
have
true.
to.
But I, maybe I'm the only one here, but I think I'm missing the point here, because I don't care if there's 200 packages or 500 packages or 10 packages. And if there's 1 truck a week, 2 trucks a week, there's going to be a lot of trips in and out of that alley with a personal vehicle delivering to the other places or whatever. Just as much damage as that big truck is gonna make in those alleys, that person driving their personal vehicle, you can't police how many times they go in and out of their garage, I get that. The more they do that every day, the less safe they do that every time they go. Because it's in, out, in, out. If there's small children in the alley, if there's other vehicles in the alley, it's just you get in a rut and you get in a routine, you do it, and that's when things happen.
So again, I would ask the same question, I'm not trying to argue with you guys.
No, I know, I'm not.
But so the same thing, in that case, then would you say we just don't allow this? Because that would be the other thing, we could say, the city of Huron has an ordinance that you are not allowed to do a home delivery business in a residential area. That might get more to what, because otherwise, again, it doesn't matter if we do 2 or 3, you're still gonna have the issue of if we allow people to run this type of business out of their residence, that gets back to your point, Brian, of there's a reason why residential is residential. So if we wanna look at this and say, this is, Barry's looking at it like this is no different than a barber shop or a photo studio. If you guys are saying because of the amount of traffic and the hazards that it could cause, then we're not talking about 2 versus 3, we're talking about saying, this is not allowed within the city of Huron in residential districts. And if that's the end goal we wanna get to, then that's what we need to be talking about, not 2 versus 3.
I think it has to do with the traffic on my thing.
That's it.
Whether it's the street or the alley, it's the traffic.
But you can make that argument on any type of business.
You can.
I think we've got a motion and a second, Mayor, I think, unless there's further discussion. Right, with a motion in a second?
Yes, we do.
Jeff? And we're voting on first reading of the ordinance 2022, 2244-23-4110.
I appreciate you that but I still feel like we're a long way, I don't know what I'm voting for.
Well, if you want to table,
Yeah, I mean, I
Table.
understand the point that these guys are making. I think it's just a question of what the real discussion we need to be having is, do we want to say this stuff shouldn't happen in a residential neighborhood? We do not want people to be able to bring a truck down the alley and drop off Amazon packages.
And then it comes back, we've got UPS trucks, we got FedEx trucks, they go on our residential streets all the time. We're talking about the same type of vehicle. So, but I believe that probably is a different discussion for, I guess, whatever we decide we wanna proceed with the vote, or
Call the vote?
Call the vote, roll call vote, please.
Smith,
Nay.
Weinreich,
aye.
Craig,
Nay.
Robish,
Nay.
Mayor Harrington,
Nay.
does not pass.
And that ends our meeting for tonight, except we have executive session for contractual SDC